Hello and welcome to House Read, my A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones theorising channel, where usually I take the common techniques of writing and use them to try and see if I can make predictions and gain a deeper understanding about what's going on in Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. Recently, a viewer posted a comment on one of my videos. The video was Planetos, the Astronomy of Westeros, and I'll post a link in the description below. The commenter's YouTube name is Sharplight, so thank you to Sharplight for giving me the content of this video. Sharplight's comment was so interesting that I thought rather than post a comment, I would share his comments with you and do it in the form of a video response. Basically, Sharplight's theory is that Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire takes place within George R.R. Martin's 1,000 World series. Before George R.R. Martin wrote the incredibly popular Song of Ice and Fire, he wrote a large number of different books, and many of them take place within a sci-fi setting, which he calls the 1,000 Worlds universe. This includes A Song for Lyre, and 7 Times Never Kill Man, Bitter Blooms, Dark Dark Were the Tunnels, In the House of the Worm, Men of Greywater Station, Night Flyers, Sand Kings, Star Lady, The Glass Flower, The Hero, The Stone City, This Tower of Ashes, Warship, The Morning Comes Mistfall, and the Haviland Tough stories, which include The Plague Star, The Beast for Norn, Guardians, Call Him Moses, Loaves and Fishes, Manna from Heaven, and Second Helpings. So he's obviously written extensively in this universe, and what Sharplight is suggesting is that Game of Thrones is similarly set in this universe, and that could be used to possibly explain some of the discrepancies about the seasons in Westeros. So let's have a listen to a quote from his comment and see what he's saying in his own words.
There is a much simpler explanation. The humans are the remnant of a human colony originating from a future Earth. The children of the forest, the natives of this planet. The planet has a much longer orbit around its star than Earth, so winter seems to last years instead of months. The Kopf live a normal span in their planet's years, but seem to last longer when counted in human years.
So what Sharplight is suggesting is that the discrepancies in the various seasons in Game of Thrones could be explained by the human inhabitants of Westeros essentially changing planets. The different orbits of the various planets they've lived on would possibly explain why these things appear to change in A Song of Ice and Fire. So that would place the landing of the humans on Planetos after the first Great Winter, which seems somewhat unlikely given the fact that the history of Westeros from that time up until the present day includes no sort of legends of them landing in ships or anything even mildly related to that. By comparison, our own planet has more legends of people landing from outer space, hence the entire Ancient Aliens theories and so on, than Westeros does. That doesn't necessarily mean that A Song of Ice and Fire isn't set in the 1,000 Worlds universe. YouTuber Preston Jacobs makes a reasonable argument for this, but it does cast doubt on the nature of when and or if they landed from another planet, and definitely casts doubt on whether it could be used as an explanation for the seemingly changeable seasons. Sharplight then goes on to give some further evidence as to why Game of Thrones may be a part of the 1,000 Worlds universe.
This is all consistent with GRRM 1,000 World Realm BTW, where the lizard lion, your sigil, is wonderfully described in Toph's first ever story, A Beast for Norn.
Similar life forms on the planet could be suggestive that they're part of the same universe, but it may just be suggestive of self-plagiarism in George R.R. Martin. Something that Sharplight did bring up, which I found very interesting, is something which is possibly more relevant to me as a British citizen who comes at A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones with a very Anglo-centric perspective. To me, Westeros definitely resembles the country of my birth. The North-South divide, Hadrian's Wall, the wildlings resembling the Scottish perhaps, and the sort of general shape and location in relation to Essos, which kind of resembles Europe. And of course, George R.R. Martin has demonstrated interest in British history. But it's also possible that there was another key influence on George R.R. Martin when he was developing the world of Ice and Fire.
Where did GRRM grow up? New York. You know, the city that is in the center of the battlefield between the gods of Arctic ice and the gods of tropical fire. The city that gets blasted with Arctic blizzards and tropical hurricanes. The city that experiences one year a cold and windy autumn and the next an Indian summer, a prolonged summer into the autumn months. The city that knows fall springs only too well, and the city where GRRM spent his entire youth.
This idea is in fact a very intelligent explanation of why the seasons appear to change length in Game of Thrones. That is not based on the way that the planet moves around its sun and so on. Perhaps it's to do with the way that they are measuring the length of years. If they live in a relatively tumultuous climate, it's possible that they're measuring years from what appears to be summer to what appears to be another summer, but it's not what we would consider to be summer because it may take place at the wrong time of year. It's feasible that they could count an uncharacteristic hot spell later on in the year as being another summer, rather than counting the number of days. If this was the case, then there would be a cultural explanation for the peculiarity of their calendar rather than a physical one.
Read GRRM's Thousand World work. Every story he is talking about standard years, or Earth years, or years as you/we count them, meaning humans. A student of astronomy might object that longer orbits would entail longer days, but GRRM has never explained how Westeros years are counted. I mean, you would think a year should be from the end of summer until the end summer. How else do they know a year has passed? If I was writing this story, I would have 20-year-old people described the same as 60 and make it obvious that their year is actually several reader year instead. GRRM, who is arguably a better writer, laugh out loud. Have the characters themselves experiencing this disjoint between their calendar and their seasons the same way a transplanted human would feel on another planet.
I still don't buy Sharplight's explanation that people from Westeros were transplanted from another planet. I just think the weather patterns alone are not enough to justify this level of speculation to me. But I do think that there is a distinct possibility of a cultural explanation, and that what the people in the world of Ice and Fire are calling a year is not what we would consider a year. We know from our own planet that it undergoes ice ages and hot spells. Perhaps during a period of multiple cold spells, a primitive culture may consider this to be one significantly long winter. And perhaps in a period of multiple hot spells, they may consider that to be multiple years, as they add up between hot spell to hot spell and consider that to be a completed year. Well, anyway, thanks very much, Sharplight, for your comments, and they were extremely interesting. And who would have thought that there would be so much to talk about when only looking at the weather of George R.R. Martin's work? Weird. So, if you liked this video, click like, and if you really liked it, why not subscribe for more?